Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And okay, you have only half an hour. Probably it's not much for talking about a topic that I think is important and should be even more important here at CIAT. I will start highlighting what are the main points I want to make today. And then I have the privilege of having Danielle here with us. And we provide some comments, and I think probably we can start up a dialogue today on this topic. So, apart from that, I'm very sorry that I have to start with the bad news for all of you. And the bad news is that I'm not going to be as entertained as Andy was this morning. So I'm sorry for that. But the good news is that I think finally, in these 2 days, we'll start talking about a topic that we haven't talked that much and deep these days, and it's about environmental issues and why that matters for the CIR and for a center like CIAT. Yesterday, I think Christian Samper trying to put that topic on the panel he was participating on, but it didn't fly that much. And I think there was another invitee that also trying to touch that topic, but I think today is the opportunity. So for those of you that are not from here, that are not from Colombia, welcome to the Cauca Valley, where CIAT is located, and is the main sugar cane producing area in Colombia. So for those of you that flew into Cali for this celebration, and were lucky enough to have a window seating on the plane, probably you had the chance to see all the sugar cane and the vast area that is with sugar cane in this Cauca Valley. And probably you also had a glimpse of the beautiful Andean mountains surrounding the sugarcane producing area. The sugar produced here depends on the water source from those mountains. In fact, 22 watersheds, Andean watersheds for irrigation. And in 2009, and I think Senicaña director is still here, I'm not sure, he's familiar with this. In 2009, the sugarcane companies set up a water fund, which is essentially an endowment fund, the revenues from which are invested to conserve and protect those watersheds that supply with water to the sugarcane companies. The water fund has received around $3 million from that time so far, from the sugarcane companies. And I have to add to that all other voluntary contributions from nonprofit organizations like TNC, who is here also today with us. So this is a very good local example that recognizes the ecosystems as natural, as green infrastructure, and that's what we're meaning with the title, Steve, that are critical for economic activities and development. And we were used to thinking about infrastructure as being gray. So when we think about infrastructure, we think about things that are made with concrete and with cement, like roads and bridges and so on. But green infrastructure that are the mountains, the forests, the land, the water, and the ecosystems are important to sustainable economic development as gray infrastructure. So I'm going to use this opportunity today to tell you a little bit more about why gray infrastructure needs green infrastructure, and even how green needs even more green right now. So if we look a bit afield from here, similar cases as the one that I just described here in the Cauca Valley are also happening in other cities. So it's also the case of Bogota, Lima, Quito, here in Latin America, that are also investing money for maintaining the upstream natural ecosystems essential for capturing, storing, and releasing the water that is needed for their fast-growing populations. And not very far, or no, probably very much far from here is Beijing in China, which is a mega city that depends also in a single watershed where the Mingyun Reservoir is. So this is the only source of water for the 21 million inhabitants of Beijing. And similarly to what is being Bogota, Quito, Lima facing, China has to trying to deal with that challenge of trying maintaining the agricultural production in the upstream areas and to make sure that those upstream areas keep providing the water for the Beijing city. So the problem has been that Beijing has been growing like around 300%, the urban area, since 2000. And the water provision that is coming from the upstream area has declined in 30%. So how can China balance that and trying to improve or promote the landscape management of the upstream area while allowing the production of food, but at the same time securing the water for the people from Beijing and Tianjin? So these type of examples are becoming even more usual than ever. And it's for the reason that the role of green infrastructure is to secure water and food is increasingly acknowledged by many governments. And today, China, for example, is recognizing the strategic role of green infrastructure because of the ecosystem services it provides and because these are important for sustainable economic development. And they have recognized that. And even they say that it could be even important to national security. So it's for this reason that China, in this specific case, has created an environmental fund where practically Beijing and Tianjin cities and the water consumers there are paying to the local managers upstream to protect the area and introduce better management practices in agriculture. So just to give you an idea, 12% of the water charges to water consumers are being invested in the upstream area. So moving back from Asia to Latin America, Peru is another example of a government that is also taking very seriously the role of green infrastructure for the sustainable development. What they have been doing, they have been trying to set up a sort of criteria and indicators that are required by their public investment system to approve government investment on green infrastructure. I mean, those are the criteria and the indicators that the Ministry of Finances requires to approve a project, a green project with public resources. What does it mean for Peru? When I live in Peru and I start digging a little bit on that, I found that most of the green investment that Peru was doing through this public investment system was on the beautiful gardens that Lima has, and this is seriously. There's a lot of money that goes into that, and on the conventional reforestation projects. And of course, measuring the accomplishment of that investment was not difficult. So the indicators that they were using were just the number of trees planted per hectare or the number of gardens, of meters of gardens in the city. So were those investments really impacting positively the availability of water for a city like Lima? That is in a desert, and that is actually the second driest capital city in the world after Cairo, and which depend 100% on the water coming from the Andes? So probably not. So far from Lima, hiking the Andes that supplied the water for domestic use in Lima and other cities, but also for agricultural use in the Pacific coast, there is a need to better manage the Andean wetlands, the Andean grasslands, so probably those conventional reforestation projects will not work here. And also to protect the remaining Andean forests in the high Andes. And also to restore the soils that has been compacted by the grazing, and that are very key because they serve as a sponge that releases with water to downstream cities like Lima and to all the agricultural productive area of Peru. So we need to invest in these practices. So what the government has done is that they are unlocking their own system to allow the investment of public resources on this type of practices and green infrastructure. So in 2016, it was approved the first green investment project in Peru, and they keep working on that with CIAT and many others right now. So China and Peru are two examples of how public policies are targeting green infrastructure and how balancing green infrastructure with gray infrastructure is key. And this is key because neither of the two governments were neglecting the gray infrastructure. Basically, they are trying to find a balance between the gray and the green infrastructure. And I'm bringing that discussion today also because in a recent debate in the journal Science, there was a discussion about whether gray or green infrastructure was preferable or not, I mean, either of which one, for sustainable development. So I invite you don't fall in that discussion, because I think we need both. more water reservoirs and pipelines will be needed anyway to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all of us by 2030. And I'm sure you all recognize that as one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But where that water will be coming from, I mean, to fill those water reservoirs and pipelines? From the green infrastructure, from the areas upstream, from the forest, from the restored lands, and so on. So gray needs green, and development needs both. And this is one of the first points I want to make today. And my second point is that green needs more green. The world is committed with zero hunger by 2020, and we have seen yesterday and today how the countries has invested in more productive and more nutritious crops. And this is in some way an investment in green infrastructure. But these crops need, at the end of the day, reliable water and good soils. So as more food we need, as more green infrastructure we need. So are we investing in crops with that vision in mind? Are we promoting crops and seeds in integral packages that include good management practices for soils and landscapes? Probably not, or probably not enough. So this is where the agronomy and the so-called landscape approach that we also talk a lot about should be more closely linked to crop programs such as those that we have here at CIAT. And then my third point, Steve, I'm just going to finish, is that we need an international vision. Over the past decades, many countries, especially developing and emerging economies, have focused on maximizing the production of ecosystem services goods, such as crops, timber, oil, gas, and so on, at the expense of the regulating ecosystem services, and in general at the expense of the natural capital of the countries. So it has put on risk some ecosystem services that are key, like soil conservation, flood control, and climate stability. So if that's the case, what is that the measure of a country's income or wealth is the gross domestic product, and is not something like the gross domestic assets that can help us to see how sustainable we are growing. And then it recalls me something that the Minister of Economy said yesterday, the Minister of Economy of Colombia. So for some of you that had the chance to listen to him, he said, of course, under the framework of the post-conflict, that they envision a country that is able to produce more food and to export food. But then he added that he envisioned a country that is able to do that by maintaining as well the natural ecosystems. So I think he was saying this exactly. We need to get more income, but not at the expenses of our assets. So why we need the international vision? Because many of the benefits that derive from the green infrastructure leave the countries, but recipient countries often don't reinvest to ensure the long-term viability of those supply chains. And this is very important for the sustainable food systems topic that Mark was talking about. So I think we need to close that loop also with that international vision. So to finish, as we celebrate the 15th anniversary here at CIAT, I was thinking, okay, what is coming next? What is coming next here, especially on these environmental issues? And then I was thinking this morning that probably we were not talking much on the environmental things these days because environmental scientists and environmental economists are as rare and as weird as agricultural economists were 50 years ago, as we heard this morning. But still, I was thinking, what is coming next? So what could be the role of CIAT on this? So I'm going back to the water fund here in the Cauca Valley. For those of you that don't know, CIAT contribute to that with scientific information about where were those priority areas that need to be targeted with the water fund investments. And then we inform those decisions with that scientific information. And then we have done similar things in other water funds in Latin America and in Africa. But still there are some challenges. And the first one is something that I think Jürgen, someone said yesterday in the climate change panel, and is that we need to inform better ecosystem services science in a way that it helps policymakers in resolving the difficult trade-off that they have to deal with when they are assessing different alternative development pathways. The second challenge is that we need to move fast. We need robust methods to deliver results fast enough to inform decision making. But in this area, I think those methods needs to focus on demonstrating the cost effectiveness of those investments. Why is that? Because at the end of the day, the water funds are only funds. And sooner or later, the contributors to those water funds will ask, and they will want to see how cost effective were those investments compared to doing nothing. So if we don't see the benefits, those funds could dry up. And the third challenge at home is to make investments in green infrastructure even greener and make sure that they sustain the grade. Green practices should be tested, evaluated, and disseminated along with the improved crop varieties that we have been also talking about today, because no matter how good are the varieties, how productive they are, how nutritious they are, if they don't have really good enough water and good soil to grow on. So I will finish here, and I would like also to start talking more with Danielle. And thanks for listening today at the very end of this celebration. Thanks.
So Danielle, we just heard from Marcela, and
I don't like to be
let's get closer because it's so far away, you know. So
and I can't help but get the feeling that we want it all.
I know.
We want a sustainable and inclusive food system. We want green infrastructure. We want investment happening quickly. We want to have impact. How do we do this? Where do we start?
Well, that's an unfair question to me. As Norway, basically. But I mean, I'd just like to have a few comments and just to say a little bit about Marcella's presentation and the way sort of how we are dealing with this issue. And I made a few notes here what I was going to say. And actually, Marcella, I mean, your talk here was really actually, you presented the problem here, which actually there's no one solution, and everything is sort of linked together in many different ways. So green is green and being more greener, you know. I mean, forest is connected to cities. I mean, the fertilizer, which is now over-fertilizing in China, which we talked about earlier. I mean, we talked it in another meeting, but over-fertilizing is also causing a lot of pollutions as well in the cities. So a lot of things has to be done, also in the agriculture sector. But you know, it's the problem is, as a donor, how do we deal with this greening of this, and how do we sort of approach this issue? And of course, we have our challenges. We have I mean, I guess some of you have heard here of the NICFI fund or the forestry fund, and CIAT is actually also benefiting for some of those projects within the forestry funds, as is a number of other CG centers. And that's sort of an approach sort of to ecosystem benefits, ecosystem payments. But there's other issues as well. I mean, at the moment, we're sort of signing a project with a cacao project, which has a part of the deforestation inside that as well. And this is a complex issue because you have degraded lands, and people are moving into the forest and claiming new areas of the forest and starting deforestation again. In addition to that, you have refugees coming in as well, and they're also claiming land, and so on and so forth. So the questions and the problems are just tremendous, you know. And so I was just thinking that the answers is not with, I mean, I'm thinking about the politicians which are sitting in the field, sitting in Africa, or sitting in here in this country at the same time, is that, yes, I mean, it's about politics in many cases. You have choices you need to be making. And there are different lobbyists. I mean, there's many people who are saying, well, we have to do more on roads, more on infrastructure, more on medicine, more on this. So there's a lot of choices. And I think in the end, what it has to be done is that what kind of research is CIAT bringing to the table, and what kind of research are we bringing to the table as CGR as a whole? And then again, the other question is is CGR and CIAT, are they the only institutions? Are they equipped to do that, to bring that information to the table? And then a question directly to you, Marcella. and it's something also which we're struggling with as well. I mean, in the situation you are now here in Colombia, for example, with the all of a sudden, with the peace agreement which has been signed a year ago, and how are you sort of feeding into this issue with the deforestation which is happening at the moment in the field, and how is CIAT equipped to deal with that, and can you deal with it, and how are you dealing it more directly? We had a meeting yesterday about this, and to me you came with some concrete proposals, and the proposals you have, the pictures you have here are very much high on the political scale, you know, and I think you have to bring it down to what are the things which we can manage and how can we manage it together, and then keep it a bit simple at the same time, but at the same time thinking about the environment as a whole. As a first question. That's why I'm a donor, I can say it.
That's why I say that I have the privilege to be talking to him today. Okay, we'll start with the very last one, because yes, we were talking about yesterday about the post-conflict and all this dilemma with peace consolidation and deforestation here in Colombia. And yeah, I think CIAT is equipped and also should try to contribute to the peace consolidation in Colombia, because we have been hosted here. We heard yesterday all of the investment that the Colombian government has made at CIAT, and it's the time that CIAT has to retribute to Colombia. Now, how we can do that in the post-conflict, those specific proposals that we were talking about yesterday were about proposing very concrete and very specific context proposals for those areas that are now facing high rates of deforestation, but also are in need of giving opportunities for the people that are now in the ex-combats and people that were affected by the violence. So we were talking about yesterday on combining, and I think CIAT can do it if we bring seriously back the system approach that we had some years ago, and trying to design production systems that are looking beyond the farm, are looking at the landscape, and then are promoting benefits for the farmers, that we want them to stay in the rural area. Some of them we will not want, but some of them will want to stay in the rural areas, but are also committed to conserve the remaining forest that is in those areas. And I think we have the tool, we have knowledge, we have options that we can put in place to make those proposals in an integrated way. And also, and something that we have also listened all these 2 days, is that we also have the partners on the field, because I think we cannot do that by ourselves, and we also need to leave the capacity there. So yes, I think we are equipped, and I think we need to promote. And this is what I was saying. I think we need to combine the production focus with the environmental focus.
Absolutely.
If we want to really nail in this momentum of Colombia. And about your first questions, yeah, I'm sure that as much as we touch on the sustainability angle of things, and I think we are, because we are now talking about sustainable food systems, we are facing now challenges that are larger. I mean, complex situations as the one that you are talking about in Africa with cacao. So again, how we can combine and how we can provide practical solutions in a context with migration, political conflict, and poverty. So I think, yeah, CIAT and the CIRs and the partners have the pieces probably to make something also that can respond to those complex situations. But now that you are the donor and I'm not going to lose this opportunity, I think we have one challenge, and is that, as Ruben was saying, we don't have much core funding as we used to have, and now we have more bilateral projects. And many of those projects are many times approved for a very specific thing. So for example, for instance, one project for improving on beans, and then another very different project in a different location on soil restoration. So right now, what is happening is that since Ruben has lost his autonomy, as he said this morning, because of the situation, is the role of the researchers trying to combine those different projects, and if the researcher is lucky enough, he will be able to try to make those synergies and to make the projects together to provide those integral solutions to those complex situations. And sometimes we are lucky enough that we have one project in this area, the other here, and in the same geographical area. So if the researcher has the willingness, he can combine and provide some synergies, holistic responses. But that's not always the situation. So I would like to ask you back, how do you guys think about that? Because for those of you that don't know, Danielle is sitting in the System Council meeting that is happening right now. He just escaped from there for this minute. So it means that he can speak about this topic.
And nobody else is here, and they can't hear me, that's what I think, but there's probably a camera here someplace. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you see that from the donor perspective?
No, of course. I mean, we're discussing it also in the meeting and in the other meeting there as well, where you want some donors were very much wanting to focus much more, and whereas other donors are looking at let's look at systems, you know, and so it's a difficult question, and I'm very aware that there are donors which are saying I want to have this specific thing to research on this specific thing, and trying to then angle it so that you also can include a sort of a broader perspective. It's very difficult, and you need to get other donors on board. And it is a big problem in the CG system in general. We have a financing system in the CG which is window-based, window 1, window 2, and window 3, and window 1 is basically core. And that allocation is shrinking every single year. And it's very unfortunate because it's to the detriment of many other centers here. And luckily I can still say that Norway is still in window 1, but also the pressure from the politicians especially is very much, okay, we want a results-based management, we want to see results in the field. It's very short-term results which you're after, and it's not an ideal situation, especially in the research context. So it's an issue. At the same time, I just want to take on a little bit on that, is that we see also that our funding is going more and more towards funds. So, for example, the Green Climate Fund is receiving a lot of money from Norway, and it's increasing its fund. The budget of that aspect is going on and on. And it's basically because the capacity at our own system is just not there that we can do it ourselves. So we're outsourcing in many ways a number of work out to the bigger funds. So the approach for many of the centers will actually be having to work more and more together and trying to find solutions and comprehensive solutions, not a single solution, to approach these larger funds. I know it's not an ideal situation, but I mean, for example, we are working on one of those programs with the Green Climate Fund, and it's already in the process of a whole year. So it's a long process, and not us, but it's our partners who are actually. And the first proposal which went to the table was for $50 million, and said it's too small. We want to make it bigger. So it went up to $160 million. You know, so they're huge. So, and it's not only one partner; it's many partners. And I think the advantage for the CGR and also CIAT specifically, by finding your partners and maybe approaching with some of the larger programs, approaching some of these large funds to bring forward this type of approaches, and Green Climate Fund is very much on this particular issue.
Okay, so you wanted to make a question
we
there,
started with a question, and it was where do we begin, and we actually ended answering that question, and it's establish the right coalition of partners, because we need partners that are interested in the conservation of the natural resource, that understand the relationship of the gray infrastructure to the green infrastructure, that understand who the consumers of these different resources are and how they function within the food system, and so on. So ultimately, I believe the answer to the question is establish the correct partnership and establish the correct coalition from the outset, so you don't have to try and backfill it later on once you realize that you missed something along the way. So.
And trying to adapt ourselves to the new financial mechanisms for for centers like CIAT that is changing as you're saying.
It's changing
Yeah.
constantly. I mean, also within the CIAT here, I would imagine it's also changing constantly. I mean, you've changed your approaches all the time as well. So as the donors are as well. Of course, we get new politicians every 4 years, and we have to relearn them, reteach them, and tell them about the CGR and tell them about CIAT and everything. And every year, every 4 years, we do the same thing. But I mean, it's an important development, and partners is for important key partners here is, and that's not necessarily within the agriculture sector. At the same time, Ruben, he was saying yesterday, we need to get out of the agriculture. But I'm not sure if you want to go completely out of the agriculture. I mean, stay within your sector, but at the same time, look at the other areas like, well, you have the data industries, you have the big data industries. Those are the ones who will be the future partners as well. And those are techies which are really, it's moving very, very quickly. And how can we hang on to them and sort of make it applicable to our field?
Great. Well, let's thank both speakers.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you.